Well, what's up? Welcome back to the Real Talk podcast, where we just talk about life and issues of faith and just life in general, things that we're learning. And sometimes it's hard for us to pick a topic of what to talk about and what would be most helpful to you, but we felt like we could not talk about anything else today but the election. And we actually had to switch up today's podcast because at the time of this shooting, we thought that we would know who the winner was, but we actually don't. And so I was going to ask you, what do you think of the outcome? But John, just share, like, what are you thinking right now as we don't have a winner here?
Yeah, like you said, it's funny. We moved it. We normally do it on Tuesday, but we did it this week on Wednesday because we're like, well, we're going to know who the winner is so we can talk about the outcome. And so it's so funny that we moved it to a different day when we thought we would know, and we still don't know. But I was thinking about it in terms of the outcome, and like, to me, that's perfect for this year. That's so 2020. It's
Classic
like we
2020.
We don't know that. It's like the day after the election. We don't know. Who's going to win at this point. And it looks like it's going to be the closest race in modern history. And in the past, I remember, like, was it 20 years ago with Bush and Gore, Florida was like super close. They did the recount. But there's like 5 states or something like that right now that are like extremely close. And so what I think that outcome actually shows us is the entire problem, everything that's going on, and it's that our country is extremely divided, right down the middle, 50-50. I mean, this is the problem, is that it is so close. And not only is it so divided, but people are so passionate on both sides. And so I think my reflection on the outcome, I was kind of hoping we'd find out last night because I was intrigued. My reflection is I think it shows us why 2020 is 2020. And I think it's going to show us that this is also going to continue for the next few months. And because it looks like whoever loses, maybe especially if Trump, it looks like Trump, if he loses, he will really contest it. So my reflections on the outcome are, this is 2020 and this is where we're at.
Yeah. It's interesting how you talk about a divided country. And I was reading an article that said that no matter who wins the election, you're going to be surprised. And I think that's because the people that we all generally talk to, we're typically in spheres and circles in which people think very similar to us. And so everybody thinks that they represent the majority of the country. And so you think you have a lock on kind of what the country is thinking. And I think everyone thinks that no matter which side that you're on. And so an election like this is like real data. We love real data. So like the votes are coming in and we're finding, wow, it's a lot closer to 50-50 than probably either side imagined it would be. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. And so, like, if I had to guess who's going to win right now, I don't know if I could make that prediction, because we got several swing states and, Biden's a little bit ahead in some, Trump's a little bit ahead in some. And
it's like the experts right now are saying we don't know. So me, John James, going to be up here like in the loft of the church, like, oh, it's going to be this person. It's just kind of dumb. But that's Facebook for it. It's like experts, like, this is like their job. They're like, it's too close to call. And like, your Uncle Frank's on Facebook telling you what's up. It's like, okay, whatever.
Can I just throw this in there? I'm sure you were watching the election just like us last night. You're glued, you're flipping channels, MSNBC, all the different ones, and it's like they got to fill like 12 hours of time where they don't really know any real data, right? So they'll be like, we're projecting this, and you look and it's like 0% or like 1% of the total count has come in, and they're like, we're giving it to, so anyway, they just got to fill the air, and I was watching one where like they were like trying to interview people on the street, and I'm just like, man, just the media, man, trying to fill airtime.
Well, and we always forget, man. I recently saw this with like the Social Dilemma where like, oh, Facebook's a business. They make money on like keeping me on the app or whatever. Same thing with media. That's why, for them, like, I think most media members in their heart of hearts, they don't like want bad things to happen, but hurricanes and, contentious elections and Trump saying different kinds of stuff. They make a lot of money off this, and I cannot tell you how much. Last night was like their Super Bowl, the ads that were running there. And it's so funny, man. You go to because I was flipping between the different like channels or whatever. Like you go to Fox News and like there's like ads for like the NRA, like they're getting it in there, and you go over like to MSNBC and it's like different kinds of stuff or whatever. Which that was interesting, man. I made sure I kind of flipped around because like depending on what channel you were watching, you could feel yourself kind of feeling like, oh, it's going towards Trump or, oh, it's going towards Biden. But then in reality, you wake up today and we're kind of right in the middle, And so, but anyway, it's one of those things where I think that like people are kind of shocked. One thing I will say really quick though is, I think what it does show, like you were saying, that people think everyone thinks like them, like looks like the polls got it wrong again in a lot of ways. There was more support for Trump than everything you were hearing, And so it's amazing because that happened last time and we're like, well, is that going to happen again? And so I think it just goes to show you, because, naturally media centers are not in like rural, Iowa, you know, and so it makes sense that they're going to be in the cities, you know, which tend to be more left leaning. And so, you know, all those people, it's just like you cannot escape your personal bias, which I think as Christians should humble us in saying that, like, we should always be skeptical that, you know, in our own self, we don't see things properly. We need to be like in the word, in prayer, and just humble about God. Help me see things clearly, because all people, even professionals, get it wrong. I think in a sense, because even if Trump loses, he was a lot closer than they thought it was going to be.
Well, all right. So we haven't learned who the winner is, but we can't. There's definitely some takeaways already. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what are you learning about culture and just people in general from election, because it reveals a lot of what's happening under the surface. It brings it to the surface. So,
and we've talked about this for a long time, and we've been talking about this here at New Day, and for so long. It's just more of a confirmation of it that in our day, I would say for a lot of people, politics is either their god or one of their gods. The political state of things is what makes people feel like things are okay. And if politics are going well, or if they feel like the person with their worldview is the president or has the House or the Senate, they feel good. If not, they feel really bad. And so I think we're seeing that, and I think we've been sensing that, but we see that at an extreme level right now. And I think what that shows us too is, like, you know, we all know, especially in like our American culture, that people go to church less. The data shows that. We know people less affiliate with Christianity more than ever. And it's not that they're going to other religions. It's usually becoming like identifying as like none, like just I don't even think about it, or atheist, or agnostic, or whatever it is. And what we always forget about is when people make that move from being like believing in God and a greater narrative, a greater story that the Bible tells us, they don't just stop having faith or ultimate belief in something. They have to move that somewhere. And I think if we had to guess, okay, so if people are believing in God less, what are people increasingly putting their faith and hope in? I think you're going to think, well, it's the government, it's politics. And so it's no shocker that the divisiveness that goes up with politics is kind of trending with maybe kind of faith in general that's kind of going down. And it's not a good trend either, you know? And so my first observation is I think politics are really becoming what people are increasingly looking to in our culture oftentimes. And my second reflection is it's a really bad God. Like that's not a good thing. And I don't think anybody would agree that, like, oh yeah, like mental health is really getting a lot better because of all this. Like it's not good. And there's a guy who I'm friends with here in our church, and he was texting a group of us today saying, guys, it already happened. He goes, I had a patient at the place that I work who came in and told me that if I did not vote for the candidate they voted for, that I don't love them. Like a patient they were working with told them that. And another friend texted him and was mad because he could tell that he probably voted for the other person. And so it was literally like two people in the same day. We don't even know the election. We don't know the outcome yet. You know, that person might have won. Yeah. But so really it's almost like the politics is a god that makes people hate other people and dislike other people, and it also makes us uneasy. And so, like, if my God is politics, then I'm feeling really rattled right now, and I'm also mad at the people that have forsaken my God. Yeah. You know, you forsake my God, you went against my God. And the last thing I'll say, I think what this has shown, and I think this is actually a good thing, Christians do not have a political home right now. Some Christians might still think they do, and they're entitled to that opinion, but I know that we both feel that way. And I know increasingly I see that growing. I see Christians feeling like there's not really a party that reflects, you know, the fullness of biblical values, and not even close, you know. And there's major problems on both sides, and we're doing what everyone else is doing, where it's like if you vote, you kind of hold your nose and vote. Yeah. And so I think that's growing. I think Christians are feeling that way, but I think that's a great thing, because I think it causes us to look away from politics, to focus on like the greater eternal things, and to not only focus on just like the heavenly things, but also the earthly things of like real people and not just politics. And so I think that's actually a good development for Christians, that we're kind of being alleviated from kind of being labeled one way or another politically.
It's a good word. I think for me, as I just reflect on kind of what we know so far, and we've known this throughout the whole season, like I think the world, our secular culture at large, is really unequipped to handle differences, like different worldviews. And there's radically different worldviews.
No, there's no love your enemies.
No, none of that. And so like we're unequipped to handle the differences between us. And so that's why culture they pull out the same old tricks like outrage and demonizing or stereotyping millions of people that they have never met, which I think is like crazy. The idea that you can like take an entire swath of people and with a single word label them, and I think that's just where our culture is going. And so there's no tools, I think, in the tool chest of culture to deal with differences of opinion and to handle different worldviews. And of course, we believe that the gospel and in the church, we are equipped because we do have the Holy Spirit, and Christ has given us an example and a way to live. And so I think you're seeing that in culture, and it really comes out on election day. So that's number one. Number two, I think this is an election where really the true winner is fear, I think, because you're finding that, like, have you met one person who's like super excited about Biden, right? People that I've met, maybe you have, but I haven't really met anyone who's been super excited about it. I have met people who are excited about Trump, but more or less, I think that really people are voting against the other candidate more than they're voting for a candidate. I think you saw that with President Obama, where like basically Trump is like a referendum on that entire, narrative in the Democratic Party. And I think Biden is kind of like a referendum on Trump. And so I think you're seeing that in our culture where like what's driving people like in their heart of hearts. And even as I've watched people on election day, as they've done interviews of just people on the street, it's fear, there's a fear of what happens when this other person gets elected. And I don't want to minimize the consequences. Like different things will happen as each person gets elected. But I've just noticed that in the culture, that the driving thing is not hope or progress, which secularism always tells us that it's going to be progress. Like that's not what's driving them. It's really fear.
That's a great point, man. It's not what bright future do you want? It's like it's all doomsday.
Yeah, what dark future do you want to try to avoid or like prevent?
Well, dude, because the world doesn't have hope. So if there's no clear sense of hope, no. I mean, the Bible tells us what is to come, but like if you don't have that, then there's nothing there.
So let's talk about like us as Christians, and you and I have talked a lot about this, how in many ways there's not a lot of difference between just kind of a secular cultural response to the election as Christians. There's a lot of similar reactions, and you're not seeing a whole bunch of difference where there should be a difference, I think, in the church and in believers, the way that we respond to elections. And so just talk about that a little bit. How should a follower of Jesus like make sense of all this and respond?
Well, I'm going to get really personal on this one because honestly, man, I've been convicted in this season. And I'm changing, and we always talk, we love changing. We love repenting and growing. Like repentance is wonderful. I get to change and become something different and grow. And I would say it's a combination of repentance, but also just kind of maybe becoming more aware of something. One of the things that I realized in this is I don't want our response to be just totally forget politics, totally forget the country you're a part of. I've been in the Word reading where obviously like Romans 13, where God establishes like government, and so government is really something that God oversees, and even in the Old Testament we see God using like even evil nations like the Assyrians to do some good work in refining His people, and so we see all these different kinds of themes where God works through that. And I think my tendency, just because honestly I have so much frustration with this system and what it's doing to people, you can get resentful towards like any kind of authority in general or governments or countries or whatever. And I think I'm learning that we want to be good citizens as Christians. And I've really committed to thinking about that more and saying, man, how can, like specifically in our church, the people of New Day, how can we be great American citizens who work towards the good of this nation while not being obsessed with politics? And so a few things really quick for me, and I think for anybody, is number one, I'm going to start to pray for our president and for our nation, no matter who wins. I'll be honest, I don't do that a lot. I don't. And maybe for me, one of the reasons why in the past I've had frustrations with politics in general is not just because it's corrupt, but because I'm not really praying about it. And maybe I truly would have a lot more hope. And I do have hope for a lot of different things. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm going to pray for our nation. And I think that, we sense a lot is changing and it's kind of becoming more kind of corrupt in a lot of ways. And so there's a tendency to jump ship. And so, but I think that we should be praying for our nation and praying for our country. I think also being good citizens, like add to the flourishing of our nation in whatever ways that we can. And so, I think that we, as Christians, when you think about it, we're not anarchists, like we're supposed to be good citizens who bring peace, And hopefully in this season, I think what a lot of people have seen is like, no matter what you believe, and I think we'll talk about this some as well, like, you want stability in a society. You know, like ain't nobody liberal or, you know, conservative is going to get a lot done if everyone's like, there's war in the streets, you know, whatever you want to pursue in this life, whether it's good or not, like it's hard to pursue that when your head's gonna get chopped off, you know, whatever. So it's like, it's pretty crazy. So it's like, I think we're realizing that we want to be good citizens, and as Christians, we should be peace bringers, right? In the places that we can, and not people adding to like the craziness. I think another thing a way we should respond is I think that we should once again obsess over Jesus, obsess over your own discipleship, obsess over loving real people, and do not obsess over politics. I think that's a huge one, right? Do not obsess over politics. We have seen what happens when we obsess over politics, and so I think as Christians, we should obsess over Jesus, the church, living local, and not over the things that we can't control. And the last thing is love your enemies. And I mean, I'm taking these straight out of Scripture. Love your enemies. You made a great point. The culture has no framework for that because they have no reason to love their enemies, right? Because they're their enemies. Christ, when we were his enemy because of our sin, died for us. Yep. We have all the motivation in the world to love our enemies. And so I think that we should not only pray for our nation, not only should we be good citizens, not only should we focus on Jesus, but even in the people who radically disagree with us and are even mean to us, we should be the ones to love them. We should be the ones to say, I'm not going to retaliate in that. I'm not going to shoot back that Facebook post, you know. I'm not going to embarrass you in public. I'm not going to cancel you. Like, I'm going to love you. I'm not going to allow you to, like, you know, maybe abuse me or do bad things in that sense, but I am going to love my enemies. And I think if even just one side would commit to loving enemies, man, it would diffuse the whole situation, and at the very least would expose the evil and the venom on one side.
Man, that's so good. When you add Jesus to the equation, it
so
like changes
good,
everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love how you're talking. I would totally agree. Obsessed with Jesus, and I think people, they probably like overestimate the impact of their political involvement and probably underestimate the impact of just personal involvement in people's lives and local community. And we're always big champions of that. How like you make a true difference not by thinking it like nationally, but thinking like locally and what's within your sphere of influence. And so that would be my big encouragement for Christians and how we respond, where we're thinking about what's happening nationally, we're participating in the ways that we can, but we're not putting our hope like in that. We're putting our hope in Christ, and that really changes the narrative. Like, you know, no matter who wins, it truly does not matter in the grand scheme, the cosmic scheme of what God is doing in the world. And I've just been reading a lot of Old Testament scripture about just like how in Daniel it says God removes kings and he sets up kings. And I read that and I'm like, do we actually believe that? Yeah. Do we believe that he's in control? And so just on that narrative, let's just think about just the future a little bit as we think about the church and kind of where we're going. Maybe what are some of your predictions? Where do you think Christianity is going and the church is going in regard to just politics and government?
Yeah, so I think that I'll make one prediction on just like the culture at large for politics, for conservatives and for liberals. I think, even if people will not say it publicly, I think, in an optimistic sense, I think the culture at large, both sides, conservative and liberal, have kind of seen a lot of the dark side of their party. And they might not say it publicly right now because they're all trying to get their people elected. But I've talked to several people who would consider themselves more like left-leaning and even seen the things they've posted online. And I can tell that a lot of people that probably more liberal in nature are pretty concerned about like the unrest and even like the rioting and all those kinds of things. Like there's this assumption that like everybody on the left is like really, really cool with that. And I think that actually scares a lot of people on the left, because if society goes crazy and there's war on the streets, that's not good for anybody, and not good for their kids. The conservatives, I think on an optimistic sense, I've kind of seen that like it's okay to advocate for things, but like when you have a candidate like Trump, same thing, when you create that kind of chaos, because he has a personality where he'll just kind of go at it, can be kind of divisive, like that can make it hard, you know? And so is it possible to maybe have a candidate that advocates for the things they're passionate about, you know, without being on Twitter all the time? You know, I mean, like at the end of the day, like I think they're realizing like the personality really does matter, and you could maybe even argue in some ways maybe it kind of cost them potentially the election this time. So I think in terms of politics, I think both sides have kind of seen like the kind of darker side of what they're about, and hopefully in the future it's like we can do this in a more civil manner. I think the optimistic thing for the church, and it's hard because I don't think we'll know fully about this until maybe 10 years down the road, but I really believe that this election could be seen as the time where the church, like you were saying, really put politics in its rightful, healthy place and realize, okay, that can't be our God and we can't obsess over this because that's not good. I really believe that it's like, listen, we want to be good citizens. We want to vote. We want our voice to be heard and all that kind of stuff. But like, man, look at what that did. So we shouldn't give our lives to that. And so I really think that Christians hopefully will see themselves as people who, like, it's okay if you don't know exactly what candidate to vote. We don't have to align the church with a party. I don't have to align myself with a party. And I bet what that does in the future, I bet God, I would not be shocked if he's opening up evangelistic opportunities to reach people from all different spectrums politically in the future for the church in America, because I don't think most people associate the church with any political party anymore. And I think probably this election changed that. And so I'm just optimistic that I think, because there are always people, and we've had some friends with this, where it's like, I know they're a Christian, but they post about politics way too much. And I can't tell you because I don't know your heart, but something about me says, man, something's off, you know? And even the church at large, like I remember like when I was growing up, like we'd have like, you know, an American flag, you had to have an American flag in the sanctuary or whatever. And it's kind of thing, you know? And I think this time it hopefully helps us get to a place where it's like, we want to be good citizens. I am proud to be an American. I'm here because I want to be here. Like, I'm not moving to Belgium because I want to be an American, not Belgium, you know, right now, unless the Lord calls me to be a missionary there or something, you know.
No matter who wins, you're going to stay.
Yeah, I'm here, you know, which it's funny, man. I saw realtors being like, hey, if you're moving, like, I'll sell your house for you, you know, kind of thing. But no, I just feel like it's probably put politics in a healthy place for honestly, for healthy Christians. And I think moving forward, we'll be like, man, yeah, our hope can't be in politics, and no matter what party, it can go awry. And so, man, focus on Jesus, focus on loving real people, living in community. And if anything, maybe this was a warning sign to Christians that will produce a lot of fruit in the future, as well as open up new evangelistic opportunities to reach people on both sides.
Yeah. You know, looking into the future, politically speaking, I'd be very interested to see if President Trump and his personality and just his approach is an anomaly or a precursor of what's coming in the future. Yeah. Because when you think about it, most politicians, most presidents are a little bit more vanilla, you know, just like it all comes down to like policy and vision for the future. And it felt like this one just for some reason, Trump is driven on personality. And so I'm just wondering if that becomes like a new staple or a new baseline for candidates of the future. And, you know, my personal preference would be that perhaps hopefully in the future that we go a little bit back more toward policies and a vision, you know, it's just different views of the future and where we're going. And so that's just kind of something I'll be interested
like, are you saying
see.
Like they're basically deciding based upon what the person like is putting forward for the nation, and not like, do I like him or not? Like, cult personality driven.
Yeah, exactly. No, you know, we see
which is dumb when you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we see that in the church sometimes, like big pastors, people are driven to like personality. And so I'm just hoping that like maybe we get a little bit more back to like issues as opposed to personality or the person themselves. But then as I think about the future of the church, yeah, man, my hope is that the church will become like that the government will disappoint Christians enough for them to put their trust back in God again.
That's a great way to put it.
That's my hope.
Dear God, we allow the government to disappoint us, please.
Exactly. So we can put our hope in Jesus Christ again, because the church truly is, we say it's the counter community in the world. And what's really cool about the church, and I preached about this recently, the church is the most diverse community, the most diverse family on the planet.
It is.
It has socioeconomic diversity, it has political diversity, and yet it has racial diversity, and yet it is all united under the banner of Jesus. And so I think that the more the church can not become a monolith of uniformity, but as everybody from different backgrounds come together under the lordship of Jesus, that it creates a really beautiful image to the world that I don't think it's currently presenting maybe in this election.
Yeah. Well, man, that's great. Like I said, I think hopefully we'll know here pretty soon kind of what it's going to look like. But I think that, you know, if anything, man, I think the good news with all this is just like no matter who ends up winning, you know, because as of recording this, we're not quite sure yet. I think based upon the conversation that we've had today, no matter who wins, like we know as Christians what we're supposed to do. Maybe that's the lesson in all this is that no matter who wins, no matter what person the Lord allows or doesn't allow to be the president of the United States of America, it really doesn't change what we do as Christians. And that's a good sign because it shows that it's not dependent upon politics. Like we are who we are, no matter what humans are in charge in different powers of authority or places of authority until Jesus comes back. And so no matter what, like it's good, we know what to do, and we're just awaiting his return.
Man, it's a hopeful way to end it. Thank you, John. And thank you guys for watching, and we hope to see you next time on the Real Talk podcast.